In a related development, as child labor remains a pressing issue in South Africa, affecting the lives of thousands of children across various sectors, the government of South Africa, in partnership with civil society organizations, international agencies, and local communities, recognize the urgency of addressing the scourge. To curb child labor, the Department of Employment and Labor is implementing a comprehensive strategy project that combines prevention, protection, and rehabilitation efforts and strives to eradicate child labor in the agricultural sector. The project will be piloted in 2 provinces, KwaZulu-Natal and Western Cape. To further discuss this, I'm being joined by Officer in Charge of the International Labour Organization Decent Teamwork, Maria Machaillo Molebatsi. Maria, thank you so much for talking to us on this.
Good evening to everybody.
So let's start with understanding this. What is the overall objective of these child labor projects?
The objective of this project is basically taking off from the Child Labor Summit that was held in 2022 hosted by the South African government. And the project is one of the ways for South African government to actually take heed of the commitments that were made at that conference. That is to scale up action in terms of eliminating child labor in the agricultural sector. So the idea is basically to support the government of South Africa in terms of implementing and following up on its commitments and all the conventions that South Africa has actually ratified that relates to child labor, but also to help build the capacity of South African stakeholders, that is government, employers, labor movement, NGOs, including civil society, for them to actually take part in this process of eliminating child labor in the country.
So what are the main sectors, or which industries would you say that child labor is prevalent? And what are the enablers? What are the factors that causes or makes it easy for children to be used for hard labor?
Yes, recently the ILO, together with UNICEF, released their global statistics, which actually indicated that 160 million people worldwide, or children worldwide, are involved in some form of child labor, and that 79 million of those are actually doing hazardous work. It has also revealed that the sub-Saharan Africa is actually a sticking saw in the whole issue of child labor, because 72 million of children in sub-Saharan Africa are involved in child labor. And it also indicated that the agricultural sector is the one sector that is actually very much involved in issues of child labor, and where you find most children involved in child labor. And as you ask, what are the real causes of child labor? What we have seen, especially in this part of Africa, is that economic growth has actually not been inclusive enough, but also extreme levels of poverty has actually pushed many families to resort to child labor in order to close the gap. We also realize that the social protection schemes that exist are not sufficient to cover those families. And in the end, they resort to child labor.
So finally, before I let you go, Maria, you have talked about the fact that government of South Africa is collaborating with CSOs, international bodies are also coming in, local communities are also going to be partnering with other stakeholders to put an end to this scourge. Now, I'm looking at a scenario whereby those who are into these nefarious activities fight back. And now when they put up a resistance against the fight or the need to stop child labor, most especially of course, child labor in Africa or in South Africa. Now, are there mechanisms by which to stop issues like this, to put an end to resistance, to ensure that those who engage in these acts are brought to book? It's not only to try to stop discourage, but then is to make sure that some people are served as deterrents. Some people are made to pay for these atrocities. Are there areas by which, of course, are there things or mechanisms in place to use this kind of mechanism to deal with issues like this?
In fact, the whole purpose of this project is actually to implement those mechanisms. And there are very many approaches that could be used to actually scale up the elimination of child labor. And this is actually multifaceted. One and most important is actually enforcing the adherence to the law. So that is actually very, very important. But secondly, it's very important to promote responsible business, because those who are involved in business, there are many mechanisms where even through the ILO, we promote what we call responsible business to ensure that businesses are not involved in that. But thirdly, is to look at ways to help those families that are more in distress and have the temptation to resort to child labor. And overall, there is need to strengthen the collaboration of the stakeholders, that is government, communities, labor, business, and the NGOs in this fight. Because it's not going to be one approach that will actually achieve the objectives.
Of course, of course. Maria Molebatsi, officer in charge, ILO, Descent Teamwork, thank you so much for talking to us on this. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.